Hi ladies and gentlemen, I hope everyone is doing well today. Today we are looking at forming ions. So we start off with some information, 4 different Bohr diagrams of atom A and atom B, and then an ion of atom A and ion B. Remember the protons are given to us, we can always figure out the electrons by adding them up. Not much to say because we've already looked at a bunch of these pictures, Bohr diagrams. So then question 1, I highlighted the word atoms for us. You have to remember atoms are neutral. You should remember why. If not, remember it gives us a number of protons. I recommend adding up the number of electrons and then comparing. Next, we're looking at the identity of atom A and B. Remember, we have the protons, so we have the atomic number, so we can always use the periodic table to figure out what it is. And then in the diagrams above, how does an atom become an ion? So compare what changes. So what changes between atom B and ion B? What changes between atom A and ion A? So next, question 4. Question 4, we are figuring out charges. So you can compare the protons to the electrons. So remember, protons are positive, electrons are negative, and you can figure out the charge that way, or you can use the formula. Charge equals protons minus electrons. So plug in how many protons we have, how many electrons we have, and then solve. You do it for ion A and ion B. Question 5. So question 5, we're figuring out how many electrons does ion A have. So just go back to the Bohr diagram and count them. 5b. 5b, so to figure out which atom has the same number of electrons as ion A, you have to remember that atom means protons equal electrons. You also have to count the electrons, which you already did in 5a. So now that we know how many electrons we have, we know protons equal electrons, so then we know that the number of electrons equals the atomic number. So now we can use our periodic table to figure out which atom has that many electrons. We do the same thing for 6, just this time we're doing it with ion B. So then next question 7. So question 7, we're looking at a bromine atom, so we should know how many electrons a bromine atom has. It tells us it gains 1 electron to become an ion. So to figure out which atom this is, you have to remember that protons equal electrons. So then once you have the total number of electrons, you know that the electrons is equal to the atomic number. Then you can use the periodic table to look up that atomic number. That is your atom or element. Question 8 is the same, just this time we're using cesium instead of bromine, and instead of gaining 1 electron, we're losing 1. So you do the same thing, figure out the electrons. This time we subtract 1 electron. We know protons equal electrons, so electrons equal the atomic number. So then we can use the periodic table to find out which atom it is. Question 9 and 10 are just looking at our answers from 5 through 8 to try and find a trend. What I recommend doing is trying to think about which column all of the atoms you figured out are in. So then the last page we're looking at some information on ions. So I remind you of the definition, so remember an ion is the same element, same number of protons, however different number of electrons. Remember you can either gain or lose electrons. A couple things that I want to point out from the information is it reminds us about noble gases. It tells us noble gases are very stable, so ions form in such a way that they will have the same number of electrons as a noble gas. Whoops. Let me erase these real quick. So, we're right now looking at a Bohr diagram. We're looking at a Bohr diagram of oxygen. Oxygen has 8 electrons, so we have 2 in the first, 6 in the second. We know that noble gases are very stable. Noble gases have 8 valence electrons. Every element, every ion wants to form 8 valence electrons. So, the general rule is atoms will gain or lose the fewest number of electrons possible. This is the octet rule. So right now, oxygen has 6 valence electrons. So it can either gain or lose electrons to try to have 8. So it can either gain 2 or lose 6. The rule tells us that it wants to gain or lose the fewest number. So 2 is fewer than 6, so we gain 2 electrons. So we can draw our 2 electrons in. Now we can think about the charge. The charge of the oxygen ion is -2. The reason why it's -2 is because electrons are -1, and we added 1 electron, so -1, and then we added a second electron, so -2. So that's kind of how ions form. Remember, they want to use the fewest number of electrons possible to get to 8. You can either gain or lose. So then next, Question 13. So when you're thinking about whether or not an atom will lose or gain electrons, just compare the numbers. So remember, it wants to gain or lose the fewest numbers possible. Question 14. So 14 is asking us to find the ion charges. So what you can do to do this is to find the valence electrons, then determine if the atom will gain or lose electrons based on how close it is to 8 valence. Remember, if you lose electrons, it becomes positive. If you gain electrons, it becomes negative. I hope this helps. Please answer every problem. Bring your questions to class, and we'll take it from there.